It's February 2026. And if your job involves moving, well, anything across a border, a container of chips, a crate of wine, the world has just fundamentally changed.
Oh, completely. It's not just a few new taxes.
No, it feels like a complete architectural overhaul of global trade.
It's a different planet from just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone from a system that was all about efficiency, low prices,
Right.
to one that's about geography, relationships, and frankly, survival.
And to navigate this new map, we're pulling apart the Global Trade Update just released by UN Trade and Development, UNCTAD. We picked this one because it highlights a paradox that, on the surface, just makes no sense.
It's the kind of thing that would have failed you in an Econ 101 class back in 2020.
Right. The core finding is this. In 2026, a country can face way higher tariffs on its exports to the U.S.
So they're paying more at the border.
Way more.
Yeah.
And yet somehow they can become more competitive and actually gain market share.
Which just sounds impossible. The basic logic is you tax something, you get less of it, your costs go up, sales go down.
But that conventional wisdom is dead. So the mission for this deep dive is to explain why that rule no longer applies. We're going to unpack how the U.S. moved from a uniform system to this fractured, jagged landscape.
And who's winning and who's losing?
Exactly. Because the winners are not who you'd expect. And we are going to talk about chocolate.
The chocolate example is actually, I think, the key to understanding the whole structural problem. But before we get there, we have to start with the one concept that explains that paradox.
Okay.
The report calls it relative competitiveness.
This is the heartbeat of the new economy, isn't it? For so long, businesses, even us, we were all obsessed with the absolute number. The tariff is 10%.
And that made sense in the old world. But relative competitiveness just shifts the whole focus. It says, look, it doesn't matter what your tariff rate is. What matters is the gap between your rate and your competitors.
It's like the difference between a solo time trial and a demolition derby.
Huh? Yeah, go on.
In a time trial, you just want to go fast. In a demolition derby, you don't have to be fast. You just have to be the car that's slightly less wrecked than everyone else.
That is a very vivid way to put it. But yes, imagine you're a supplier. The U.S. slaps a 10% tariff on you. That hurts.
Squeezes the margins.
But if, in that same breath, they slap a 40% tariff on your main rival,
You suddenly look pretty good.
you're the golden child. You became more expensive, sure, but your competition just became unaffordable.
You win by default.
You win by relativity, and that is the defining feature of 2026.
To really see how drastic this is, let's go back to the ancient history of 2024.
It feels like a decade ago.
It does. But back then, trade was boringly predictable.
And boring is good for business. In 2024, nearly 2/3 of all U.S. imports came in under what we call Most Favored Nation rules, MFN.
That was the bedrock of the whole system, the WTO.
It basically meant we treat everyone the same. A widget from Vietnam faced pretty much the same duty as a widget from Brazil or France.
The playing field was flat.
Relatively. But fast forward to now, early 2026, that uniformity, it's gone. The UNCTAD data shows that today, only about 20% of U.S. imports fall under those standard rules.
That is a staggering drop from over 60% down to 20%. So the vast majority of goods now get some kind of special or punitive rate.
And the average applied tariffs are up by nearly 15 percentage points overall. But again, the average is misleading. It's the variance. That's where the story is.
Let's get into the specifics then. The winners and losers, because this is where the theory hits the real world. The report brings up South African wine.
Ooh, yeah, that's a brutal one.
They have a great industry. But the data looks bad.
It is bad. The tariff on South African wine is up sharply. But the killer is that it rose more than the tariffs on wine from other places. So relative to their competitors, they're now facing a price disadvantage of about 17 percentage points.
So if I'm a buyer for a supermarket, that South African bottle just became 17% less attractive than one from Chile or France, just because of taxes.
Exactly. They've been priced out. But let's flip it. Let's look at a winner in this demolition derby.
Okay.
Italian rice.
That one jumped out at me. I don't really think of Italy when I think of, massive rice exports.
They're a producer, but they usually can't compete on price with giants like Brazil or India or Vietnam.
Right.
But look at the tariff schedule. Tariffs on Italian rice did go up, so it is more expensive today than in 2024.
Okay, so it's not like they got a tax cut.
No, but the tariffs on Brazil, India, and Vietnam went up astronomically higher, so that gap widened. According to the data, Italian rice has effectively become about 12 percentage points cheaper relative to its main competitors.
That's the demolition derby win.
Yeah.
Italy didn't get faster. The other cars just lost their wheels.
And the weird implication is the price of rice for the U.S. consumer might go up, but the source of that rice shifts dramatically from the developing world to Europe.
This brings us to a term the report uses a lot: dispersion. It sounds technical, but it's just a measure of how chaotic things are.
It just measures the spread. Are we all paying 10%, or is one country paying 0 and another paying 50? And it varies wildly by sector.
Iron and steel is a good example of low dispersion, right?
Right. In iron and steel, tariffs went up hugely, about 37 percentage points on average, but they went up for almost everyone.
So it's a high wall, but a flat wall.
Exactly. The U.S. is just saying, we don't want foreign steel, period. They're not picking favorites, they're just protecting domestic mills.
Okay, but then compare that to chemicals.
Totally different story. There, the average tariff hike was pretty moderate, single digits, but the dispersion is massive. The gap between the favored and unfavored countries is huge.
Which means sourcing chemicals is a nightmare. You can't just buy the best product. You have to check the geopolitical passport of your solvent.
Right. It turns your procurement managers into political strategists. You have to bet on which country is going to stay on the good list.
And we can't talk about these shifts without talking about the size of the U.S. footprint. The automotive numbers in this report are, well, they're terrifying.
They're seismic. The U.S. imports nearly 20% of the entire world's auto exports.
A fifth of the whole market.
It's a massive chunk of global demand, and tariffs in that sector spiked by almost 20 percentage points.
A 20-point hike on 20% of the global market. That's an extinction event for some producers.
It forces a total rewiring of where cars are made. You can't just absorb that, you have to move the factory.
And then contrast that with something like cereals. Tariffs went up there too, but the global ripple was basically zero.
Because the U.S. is a breadbasket. We grow our own wheat and corn. We don't import much. So raising that tariff was symbolic. It's a keep-out sign on a door nobody was trying to open anyway.
And then you have the things we can't grow. Coffee, tea, spices.
Lottie index.
Exactly. The report shows tariffs there barely moved.
Because there's no domestic industry to protect. We're not growing coffee beans in Kansas. So even with all this aggressive protectionism, there's still a layer of pragmatic logic. If we can't make it, we won't tax it, mostly.
I want to zoom out to the big picture of winners and losers. We've talked sectors, but what about the economic status of countries? You'd think the big, rich economies would be the ones getting hurt most.
You would think so, but the data shows the opposite. In this new jagged landscape, the developed economies, the EU, Canada, Japan, they're actually the relative winners.
How does that work? They have the high-value targets.
Two reasons, really. First, they export complex, high-tech stuff the U.S. economy desperately needs and can't just get anywhere.
Right.
And second, because of that, they've faced smaller tariff hikes. The report shows their tariff advantage in the U.S. market has actually increased by about 2 percentage points.
So the rich get relatively richer, or they lose less anyway.
They're sheltering under the umbrella. Meanwhile, developing economies are getting soaked. Their relative tariff disadvantage has widened from 1 point to nearly 3.
And the least developed countries, the LDCs.
They're in the most precarious spot. They export low-margin goods. You slap a big tariff on a T-shirt, the entire margin disappears.
So what's keeping them in the game at all?
The only thing keeping many of them afloat is AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
The preferential trade deal.
The renewal of AGOA is basically a lifeline. Without it, the report suggests we'd see a catastrophic collapse in exports from those regions. But even with it, you see sourcing for things like machinery and textiles shifting away from the developing world.
Wait, textiles? That seems counterintuitive. I thought that always chased cheap labor.
It does, unless the tariff differential completely eats up the labor savings. If the tax on a shirt from a developing nation is 20% higher than from a friend-shored partner, the cheap labor doesn't matter anymore.
So the ladder of development,
yeah,
it's being pulled up.
It's certainly being greased, making it much harder to climb.
But, okay, there has to be some kind of silver lining, right?
Yep.
The report talks about trade diversion.
Accidental benefit is probably a better phrase.
Okay.
Trade diversion is what happens when a big player gets knocked out and a small player suddenly finds an open seat at the table.
And the report lists some of these surprise winners. I'm looking at the list. Mozambique.
Mozambique is seeing a massive gain in tobacco. a 13 percentage point gain in relative competitiveness.
And Benin.
Benin is up 13 points in cotton.
We mentioned rice earlier. Cambodia is finding openings there, a 4-point gain. Haiti, in men's shirts, up 9 points.
Right.
So are these countries doing something new? Did Benin invent some kind of super cotton?
No, and that's the critical point. They're not winning because of innovation. They're winning because their main competitors, likely China or other big developing nations, got hit with a sledgehammer.
It's the substitution effect. I can't buy from guy A anymore, so I guess I'll buy from guy B.
Exactly. It's an opportunity, for sure. They should grab it. But it's fragile. If the U.S. changes the rules again next year, that advantage just evaporates. It wasn't built on a fundamental strength, just a tariff anomaly.
This brings us to the part of the report that I found the most frustrating. Honestly, the most depressing. Tariff escalation.
This is the trap. It's not a new concept, but the data shows it's getting so much worse.
So what is it?
It's the practice of setting low tariffs on raw materials and really high tariffs on the processed goods made from them. It's the main tool you use to keep a country in the resource extraction box.
The message is, we want your stuff, but we don't want your industry.
Give us the ingredients, we'll cook the meal, and the report's example, the cocoa to chocolate chain, is just, it's stark.
I'm looking at the chart. It's almost comical.
So, cocoa beans, the raw commodity. They come into the U.S. mostly duty-free, zero tariff. The U.S. needs the beans.
Right. But if a country tries to grind those beans, add sugar and milk, and sell a chocolate bar,
The tariff skyrockets, but, and here's the twist, it doesn't skyrocket for everyone.
who gets the pass?
The report shows that major chocolate producers, Canada, Mexico, Belgium, Switzerland, they face relatively small tariff hikes on their finished chocolate.
So the rich countries that import the beans and make the chocolate are fine.
They're safe, but the countries that actually grow the cocoa, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Ecuador, they face massive tariff walls if they try to export finished chocolate to the U.S.
So it's a double standard. A chocolate bar from Switzerland is fine. One from Ghana is blocked.
It actively disincentivizes them from industrializing. If you're a business in Ghana, why would you invest millions in a chocolate factory if you know you can't sell the product? You wouldn't. You just keep selling the beans.
It locks in the colonial trade map.
It really does. It keeps the value add in the global north and the extraction in the global south. And it's so contradictory. We spend billions on aid to help these countries develop, then use trade policy to forbid them from developing their most obvious industries.
So we have a system that is messy, contradictory, driven by relationships, not rules. This relative competitiveness era is here. If I'm a business leader listening or a policymaker, what's the takeaway?
Passivity is death. You cannot just look at your own costs anymore. You have to be obsessed with your competitors' costs.
It's all about the gap.
It is. If you see a 5% tariff hike on your product, don't panic. Look at the landscape. If your main rival just got hit with 20%, that 5% hike is actually a green light.
It's a relative price cut.
It's a price cut. You should be aggressive. For governments in places like Benin or Cambodia, the strategy has to be agility. You have an opening now. It might close in 2 years. Maximize it.
It feels like we're seeing the end of the efficient market ideal, where the best product at the best price wins.
We are trading efficiency for security and strategy. The market is no longer blind. It's actively picking winners.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. We've been talking about millions of dollars in trade flows, but this all lands in your shopping cart.
It does.
You are paying for this new map. When you buy chocolate or rice or a car in 2026, the price isn't just labor and materials. It's the cost of this geopolitical architecture.
And the question is, are we comfortable with that? Are we willing to pay more, not for better quality, but to support a system that picks winners based on political alliances?
That is the new reality of the grocery aisle. Next time you pick up that chocolate bar, check the label. The story of how it got there is a lot more complicated than it used to be. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.